Late last night, long after the streets of Ouagadougou had gone quiet, an alarm echoed inside a small military base on the city's outskirts. A young soldier, exhausted after a 14-hour shift, rushed toward the communication room and stared at a single message blinking on the encrypted terminal. It was a document that should not have existed. A classified blueprint outlining a new African military alliance, one that France never expected to see. Within minutes, whispers spread among senior officers, and by dawn, the shockwave had already reached Paris, Brussels, and Washington. For many in Burkina Faso, this moment felt like a turning point they had waited decades for. In a small village outside Kaya, a mother of 4, Mariam, listened to the chatter on a crackling radio. She whispered a quiet prayer, hoping that whatever this new alliance meant, it would bring peace to a region that had carried too many burdens for too long. Her son, a young farmer, had been struggling to defend his land from both militants and corrupt foreign companies. To families like hers, any shift in power could determine whether they would wake tomorrow to stability or fear. But what exactly was in this leaked document? Why did it trigger immediate emergency meetings in European capitals? And why are analysts already calling this the most strategic African military alignment since the Cold War? Before we uncover the shocking details hidden inside the blueprint, let me ask you, when a continent long underestimated suddenly begins to reorganize its security architecture, is it a sign of danger or a long overdue fight for dignity? That question matters deeply, especially for those who still believe in justice, sovereignty, and the right of nations to stand on their own feet. If this story already makes you pause and think, hold on to that feeling. It's often in moments like these that history quietly changes direction, but the mystery is only beginning to unfold. What exactly triggered the creation of this alliance, and who is really behind it? The answers will surprise you. When analysts first examined the leaked African alliance blueprint, many assumed it was just another diplomatic outline, the kind of paperwork that passes through desks without consequence. But this document was different. It detailed a coordinated military framework linking Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, Chad, and 2 additional states whose names were intentionally redacted. The structure resembled a security shield designed to counter both extremist networks and foreign interference, something no African coalition had ever attempted at this scale. What shocked observers most was not the alliance itself, but the speed at which it appeared to have formed. Intelligence notes attached to the draft showed that negotiations had taken place quietly across 3 countries over a span of only 6 weeks, using encrypted channels and face-to-face meetings in remote desert outposts. It suggested a level of unity and strategic planning that Western officials did not believe these states could achieve. Inside Burkina Faso, the initial reaction was mixed with both pride and apprehension. In Wahiguya, a retired schoolteacher named Issoufou listened to officials discussing the leaked blueprint on national radio. He remembered decades when foreign soldiers operated freely across the Sahel, often making decisions that ordinary families never understood. He leaned back in his wooden chair and murmured that if this alliance truly intended to protect African lands, then perhaps the sacrifices of the past had not been in vain. Yet even he wondered whether forming such a bold coalition could provoke global powers and invite retaliation. His granddaughter sat near him, asking why the world seemed upset whenever African nations tried to stand together. He had no simple answer to give her. At the heart of the blueprint was a shared logistics and intelligence network. According to the notes, the alliance planned to deploy a joint reconnaissance unit with surveillance drones purchased from multiple suppliers, not just traditional partners. Early estimates showed that member states had already secured roughly 70 additional armored vehicles and dozens of communication towers built across remote border zones. A small paragraph in the document even referenced an upcoming trial of a homegrown cyber defense protocol, something Western analysts assumed Africa lacked the infrastructure to create. These details raised an old and uncomfortable question. Had global powers underestimated the Sahel to the point of blindness? On the ground, the changes were already visible. A farmer named Abdul, living near the Mali border, noticed unusual movement shortly after dusk 2 nights ago. Convoys passed his village road with lights dimmed, escorting officers he had never seen before. He told his neighbors that the soldiers were polite, focused, and moved with the coordination of a single unified force. For the first time in years, Abdul said he felt that someone was watching the border, not for foreign interests, but for the people who actually lived there. His relief, however, came with unease. He knew that powerful nations did not react kindly when their influence began slipping away. European response to the leak was immediate. French media outlets described the alliance blueprint as a turning point that could isolate Paris from its last strategic footholds in the region. Privately, diplomats admitted that they were stunned to see Sahel nations collaborating without Western mediation. Some officials warned that an African-led security system might undermine existing agreements and reduce France's ability to shape regional policy. The leak triggered emergency consultations across Brussels and raised questions about whether Europe had misunderstood the depth of Africa's shift toward self-determination. Yet the document also carried a warning. Buried in its final pages was a note referencing a possible external actor attempting to sabotage the alliance from its earliest stages. The blueprint did not name who it was, but the phrasing suggested a sophisticated intelligence network with significant regional reach. For analysts, this single line changed everything. It implied that the leak itself might have been intentional, orchestrated to create distrust among member states before the alliance could fully form. The stakes had never been higher. If the alliance succeeded, it could reshape West Africa's balance of power for decades. If it failed, the region could plunge into deeper instability than before. And for Burkina Faso under Ibrahim Traoré, the outcome might determine whether the country moves toward sovereignty or renewed dependence. But the most important question remains. Who leaked the document, and why did they choose this moment, when African nations were closer than ever to forming a united front? The answer, as emerging evidence suggests, may point to a source no one expected. As the leaked alliance blueprint circulated through capitals and intelligence hubs, the situation escalated far more quickly than regional leaders anticipated. The turning point came when a second message appeared on internal communication systems across Burkina Faso's defense ministry. This message indicated that an unidentified surveillance aircraft had breached Sahel airspace 3 times in less than 20 hours. Radar logs showed it flying low, skimming desert ridges, avoiding detection long enough to signal that someone was closely monitoring the countries involved in the new alliance. The timing was too precise to be coincidence, and senior officers grew convinced that the aircraft belonged to an external intelligence service, worried about losing influence. In Ouagadougou, President Ibrahim Traoré convened an emergency meeting that lasted nearly 6 hours. Witnesses later said that his tone was steady but firm, as if the leak had simply confirmed what he had long suspected. He warned that this was not just a political maneuver, but a direct attempt to undermine African unity at a fragile moment. Those present left the room with the sense that the stakes had shifted from planning to defense. Outside the presidential compound, security was tightened, and for the first time in months, citizens noticed military vehicles patrolling main intersections before sunrise. Among the public, emotions ran high. At a crowded marketplace near Bobo Dioulasso, a group of small business owners gathered around a battery-powered television as national news replayed footage of Traoré entering the emergency council. A tailor named Umar, who had lost 2 brothers during previous periods of regional instability, shook his head as the report aired. He told the group that foreign powers always acted the same way whenever African nations attempted to stand on their own. His voice cracked slightly when he added that unity was the only shield the continent had left. A woman selling grain beside him whispered that she hoped her children would grow up under a future where decisions in Africa were made by Africans. Her words carried a quiet strength that resonated with the small crowd. Not all reactions were calm. In several border towns, crowds gathered in front of administrative buildings demanding transparency. Some believed the leak indicated betrayal from within, while others feared escalation with foreign governments. Social media across the region lit up with debates, questions, and concerns. Videos circulated showing citizens vowing to support the alliance, regardless of pressure. The sentiment was clear. People were tired of seeing external forces dictate their destiny. Meanwhile, the international response intensified. In Paris, officials called an urgent press briefing. Although spokespeople avoided naming Burkina Faso directly, they expressed concern about what they described as rising military coordination outside established frameworks. Analysts on French television warned viewers that a united Sahel could weaken European strategic presence and complicate counter-terrorism operations. Some commentators urged caution, while others demanded a stronger diplomatic stance. The tone felt uneasy, as if France understood that a significant shift in regional power was already underway. In Washington, reactions were more calculated. American intelligence agencies began compiling reports on the possible outcomes if the alliance materialized fully. The Pentagon issued a statement emphasizing the importance of stability in the Sahel, but avoided mentioning the blueprint. Behind closed doors, however, advisors debated whether the alliance could reduce extremist threats or disrupt existing partnerships. Senior officials worried that if African nations integrated their security forces without Western guidance, the United States might lose influence in one of the world's most strategically important regions. Back in Burkina Faso, the tension reached its peak when a convoy transporting senior officers was forced to halt due to what appeared to be a targeted drone interference attempt. No one was harmed, but the message was unmistakable. Someone wanted to intimidate alliance planners. The officers reported hearing a high-frequency buzzing overhead before the drone abruptly powered down and crashed several miles away. The wreckage has not yet been identified, and its origin remains one of the most sensitive questions in the investigation. That same night, as reports of the drone incident circulated, Mariam, the mother from Task 1, whose son struggled to protect their family land, stepped outside her home and looked up at the dim Sahel sky. She wondered what new challenges awaited her community. She prayed that leaders would remain steadfast because the people had few choices left. Her quiet fear mirrored the anxiety growing across the region. As evidence of covert interference mounts, one question grows louder among officials and citizens alike. Is the alliance being sabotaged before it can even rise? And is the saboteur closer than anyone imagined? The leaked alliance blueprint did not stay confined to military circles. Within just a few days, its impact rippled into the daily lives of civilians who were already carrying the weight of insecurity and economic strain. In the bustling market of Kudugu, merchants gathered around a small battery-powered television, watching analysts debate whether the alliance could finally bring an end to decades of instability. One trader, a widowed mother named Aissatou, explained that every shift in national security had always affected her stall. When conflicts intensified, truck drivers avoided major routes, leaving her shelves empty for weeks at a time. She said that if this new alliance could secure even one major roadway connecting the Sahel, families like hers might finally experience consistency in both food supply and income. Yet uncertainty lingered in her voice. She knew that political change often came with a heavy price, and she worried about how foreign powers might respond to a united African front. Across Burkina Faso's northern region, village elders met beneath towering baobab trees, discussing what the alliance might mean for the next generation. Some believed it could strengthen local governance by reducing reliance on external actors who historically influence domestic decisions. Others feared that the backlash from powerful nations might cause economic pressures that rural communities were not prepared to withstand. In one village near the Niger border, a young man named Hamid described how his brother had joined a local volunteer defense group after militants attacked their farm 2 years earlier. Hamid hoped that the alliance would provide proper training and equipment to protect families without forcing young men into desperate measures. His fear was simple but profound. If the alliance crumbled under external pressure, communities would be left even more vulnerable than before. Politically, the leak set off an intense debate inside Burkina Faso's transitional government. Lawmakers argued about whether the alliance would attract sanctions from Europe or weaken international aid programs that rural populations depended on. Several ministers called for a measured approach, warning that any misstep could provoke diplomatic isolation. Others insisted that sovereignty required bold decisions and that Africa's future should not be dictated by governments thousands of miles away. For ordinary citizens, these debates felt familiar. Over the past decade, Burkina Faso had experienced political transitions, public protests, and moments of national uncertainty. What made this moment different was that the country was not acting alone. It was now part of something bigger, a collective movement that challenged the traditional power structure of West Africa. The leak also intensified regional political conversations. In neighboring states, opposition leaders demanded explanations from their governments, questioning whether they were secretly participating in the alliance. Civil society groups organized forums, discussing whether a unified military bloc could curb corruption or whether it would consolidate power among a small group of elites. In Niamey and Bamako, university students held debates about the moral responsibility of African nations to protect their territories without foreign oversight. Many of them believed this alliance represented a rare opportunity to redefine Africa's place in global affairs. Yet even among the youth, concerns remained about transparency. Would the alliance respect democratic institutions, or would it weaken them? Meanwhile, international economic reactions were swift. Reports surfaced that several European companies were re-evaluating planned investments in the Sahel, uncertain about how the alliance would reshape trade policies and mineral access agreements. For communities relying on these investments for jobs, the uncertainty created anxiety. In Bobo Dioulasso, a factory supervisor named Idrissa worried that his facility might reduce its workforce if European partners withdrew support. He told his colleagues that while he supported African unity, he hoped the government would prepare economic safeguards to protect workers if foreign pressure intensified. His comment echoed a broader sentiment across the region. People wanted sovereignty, but they also needed stability. Religious leaders also weighed in, urging calm and patience. In several mosques and churches, sermons focused on the importance of unity and wisdom during times of transition. One pastor reminded his congregation that great change often arrived with both hope and hardship. He encouraged families to pray for guidance and to stand firm in their values, even as political winds shifted. These messages resonated deeply with older generations, who remembered previous periods of upheaval and understood that political realignments could either strengthen or divide a nation. Despite these varied reactions, one truth became clear. The alliance blueprint had forced Africans everywhere to confront an uncomfortable question. What does sovereignty truly look like, and what are they willing to endure to achieve it? The leak revealed not only a military plan, but a profound shift in collective consciousness. The continent was grappling with its identity, future, and the limits of external influence. For Burkina Faso, the decisions made in the coming weeks would determine whether the alliance became a cornerstone of regional stability or another fragile experiment undone by geopolitical pressure. But as the world reacted, one crucial player had remained silent until now, and its response could redefine the entire trajectory of the alliance. As news of the leaked alliance reached Washington, the reaction was swift and unusually tense. Senior advisors briefed members of the National Security Council just hours after the document surfaced online. What unsettled them was not simply the formation of a new African security coalition, but the possibility that the United States had failed to anticipate the speed and sophistication of the coordination. For years, American strategy in Africa relied on the assumption that Sahel nations lacked the logistical infrastructure and mutual trust to form a powerful and unified defense bloc. Now, that assumption was collapsing. Inside the State Department, analysts debated whether this alliance would reduce America's ability to stabilize the region, or whether it might actually help relieve the burden the U.S. has carried for decades. A retired diplomat told reporters that Washington was entering a new era where African nations were no longer passive recipients of policy, but active architects of their own destiny. To some, this shift was long overdue. To others, it raised fears that America could lose visibility into emerging threats if the alliance restricted foreign intelligence access. European reactions were even sharper. France viewed the leak as a direct challenge to its traditional role in West Africa. Commentators on French television warned that the blueprint could unravel years of diplomacy, military training programs, and economic agreements. A former French general admitted that if Africa built a self-sustaining defense network, European influence would shrink dramatically. He added that the greatest surprise was not the alliance itself, but the intellectual and operational discipline behind it. Meanwhile, Russia and China watched quietly from the sidelines, each calculating how the alliance might shift global competition. Chinese media framed the leak as a sign of Africa's maturity, while Russian analysts suggested that the West was losing control of a region it once dominated. These interpretations fueled speculation about whether major global powers had attempted to influence the alliance or sabotage it. For the United States, however, the core question remained unchanged. Would a stronger, more united Africa contribute to stability or disrupt long-standing security partnerships? And if the alliance chose to limit foreign involvement, how would America maintain its strategic foothold in one of the world's most volatile regions? That question may soon be forced into the open, because new intelligence suggests the alliance is preparing a move that could redefine regional power in ways Washington has not yet fully grasped. As the final lines of the leaked blueprint reverberate across Africa and beyond, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. The Sahel is no longer a silent frontier waiting for decisions to be made elsewhere. It is becoming a center of strategic calculation, collective resolve, and a determination that has not been witnessed in generations. For Burkina Faso under Ibrahim Traoré, this moment carries the weight of both possibility and risk. Strengthening a regional alliance could mark the beginning of long-awaited sovereignty, but if mishandled or undermined by outside forces, it could also open the door to deeper instability that would affect millions of families who already live on the edge of uncertainty. In a world as fragile as ours, the future rarely unfolds quietly. If this alliance materializes within the next 3 months, regional borders could stabilize, joint patrols could reinforce security corridors, and communities long abandoned by global powers might finally experience a sense of protection. But if sabotage succeeds, if the unnamed actor in the blueprint strikes first, the Sahel could face a crisis more complex than anything it has endured in the past decade. This is not just a political puzzle. It is a human struggle involving farmers, mothers, soldiers, and elders, who yearn for a life defined not by fear, but by dignity. So we are left with a question that echoes far beyond West Africa. Is this new alliance the beginning of a safer, more united continent, or the spark that sets off a confrontation between old influence and emerging independence? And deeper still, can nations that have long carried the burdens of exploitation finally rewrite their destiny without paying an unbearable price? If this story has stirred something in you, take a moment to reflect on the courage required for any people to defend their land and shape their own future. Share your thoughts if you feel moved to. Your voice may encourage someone watching from the other side of the world. The journey toward justice and sovereignty is not only written by those who fight on the ground, but also by those who bear witness with honesty and compassion. As you listen to these unfolding events, may they remind you of the timeless truth that ordinary people, guided by faith and resilience, can influence the course of history. Until our next story, where more truths will come to light, may God watch over the people of the Sahel and all who long for peace in a troubled world.